I have noticed something really interesting. Maybe you've noticed this as well. If you've spent time with business owners, if you are a business owner, if you work on a sales or marketing team for an owner-managed business, you've probably noticed that most small and medium-sized companies tend to fall into two different camps when it comes to sales and marketing. You'll sit down with a team and they might say, we couldn't possibly take on any more sales. We do zero marketing, zero advertising. Our team is busy all day. Mark, we can't even keep up with the demand. And I mean, listen, if you're in a high demand industry, extremely specialized, extremely niche, and that's amazing. Congratulations. I don't know why you're listening to this podcast, the How to Sell More podcast, but welcome. And the only thing I would say to you is chances are you should probably raise your pricing. That is the number one strategy. If you are that much in demand, raise your pricing. But if we're being completely honest, if you're still listening to me, chances are you fall into the second category, where most of us do. We are here because we want growth. We want more sales. We want marketing to be more effective. We want to be able to do more with less. We want to be able to optimize things. We want more sales, more revenue, more profits. And one of the biggest challenges in my experience that business owners, that sales and marketing teams, that companies run into isn't whether their campaigns are optimized as well as they could be. It isn't whether they should be on this platform or that platform or go to this event or sponsor this or sponsor that, or even hire the next hotshot salesperson or not. It's none of those things. In my experience, businesses and companies run into the most trouble when the owner or the sales and marketing teams are not crystal clear on three things. Number one, who are you? And how do you explain what you do in extremely simple yet compelling terms? Number two, who are you competing against? And what does the marketplace look like? And number three, who are your very best customers? The ones that you should be working hard to get in front of, getting their attention, winning them over, serving them, and then holding on to them for as long as you possibly can. And so when teams struggle with these three areas, it's not because they haven't hired the right person. It's not because they don't know what they're doing. It's not because they haven't looked within their walls or anything like that. It's typically because marketing teams, sales teams, ownership, executives, I don't mean to be rude or direct or insulting here, but for the most part, you're not close enough to the customers to really understand what's going on. Now, salespeople, account managers, customer service reps, they hear from customers all day, every day. They know what customers love, they know what customers hate, they know what customers want more of. Now, tying this all together is the key to unlocking growth. It's our job as business development people, salespeople, marketing people, it's our job to say the right things to the right people in the right ways at the exact right time. And if we don't intimately understand the people that we are trying to connect with, then sales, influence, persuasion, all of it is impossible. All of it is a crapshoot. All of it just comes down to luck. And so tying this all together is critical for growth. And that is exactly what we're going to explore with today's guest, Gary Arnold. Now, Gary is a growth leader. He's a value creator. He has over 2 decades of experience leading sales and marketing and product and engineering teams at startups, at Fortune 500 companies. Listen to this. He has built and helped scale major divisions for Amazon Pay. He has helped grow Haibu's digital division from 0 to $100 million in annual recurring revenue. He's helped build out the merchant product marketing organization at PayPal. And today, Gary is the chair of Seattle's EXECUTE Mastermind Group. And so I want to welcome you to How to Sell More, the sales podcast for non-sales people, where each week we give a little masterclass to help ambitious B2B leaders tackle the biggest challenge every business owner, every marketer, every sales lead faces, and that's growing revenue. I'm Mark Drager. Let's get into it. So Gary, before we hit record, I was asking you a bit about where our zone of genius and where we want to focus the conversation. And you have had a remarkable career. You've taken me through this. And even if we had half an hour to just dedicate to all of the companies that you've worked at and all of the moves you made in your career, I don't think we could cover everything. But you mentioned focusing on your customers. Why is this something that you have spent so much time on?
Your customers are who are going to give you money, plain and simple. And if you don't fulfill their needs, they stop giving you money. And when you stop getting money, your business stops thriving. And that's a bit of a lighthearted oversimplification. But the bottom line is, until something gets sold, none of the rest of it matters. I mean, businesses exist to solve problems for people. But in order to do that, you have to trade value for money. And that's how you can create more value. So bottom line, if you're focused too much on the competitor, if you're focused on too much on internal capability or internal ability, you can really miss the customer need. And that is always going to be the most critical, because as soon as that starts to drift, as soon as you are no longer in touch with your customer, as soon as you don't really tactically understand their day-to-day and the problems that they face in their day-to-day, your solutions are going to stop evolving and stop being as relevant. And eventually somebody will come in with a better solution that knows that customer better, and they're going to take the business from you.
Now, within my agency, within Sales Loop, we are a brand strategy company, and leaders hire us to come in and do market research, do audience research, interview their best customers, interview the people who don't want to work with them. We look at the market. I have my own process for how I go about this, but I will be quite honest with you. I've never worked in a corporation that has been forced to do this internally. We're an agency that's hired externally, and I know how to come in and look from the outside. But when you're looking from the inside, this must be hard. And I say that because it seems like almost every company faces this challenge. And so why is this so hard? Why is it so hard for leadership, for salespeople, for marketing, for advertising, for client, all of the different departments that actually can touch and impact the sale, the lead gen, the client delivery? Why is it so hard to figure this stuff out?
There are kind of two core reasons in my experience. One is that you are too close to the solution from a technical perspective. I'm not technical. I come from broadly the sales and marketing side. But when you're around something day to day and you sell it every day and you are in the market, you're going to know it at a much deeper, more granular, more technical level than your customers are ever going to. And there's a temptation always then to show the depth and breadth of everything that you can do. And I see that as a stumbling block in sales processes all the time. We've identified value. The customer has identified a problem that this solution may solve, and they're focused and they're engaged and they're talking to you and moving the sales process forward. And then you get tempted to say, oh, and by the way, it can do X and Y and Z. And that has unintended consequences that can break the deal. You're selling a solution that perhaps drives leads more efficiently, or drives leads at a lower cost, or helps accelerate the sales process. And so this is a growth value proposition, right? And in that, you're probably talking to the head of sales, the head of growth, the head of e-commerce channel, or whatever your audience is on that side. They're probably thinking about how this solution drives growth for them. If you then introduce an additional aspect of the value that may save them money, you might unintentionally get some other constituents from their side. The CFO may come in and want to talk about how this works. That can be beneficial if the CFO is also sold on this. But if the CFO is not sold on it, it may kill the entire deal. Close the deal that's in front of you, expand the value and the capability set when you need to during the sales process to move it forward if it's stalled. But don't introduce things until and unless they are needed. Because again, it's very tempting to do when you know the product as well as you do, and you have that kind of depth and technical acumen. I think it's very human to want a backup. Well, if the whole organization that I'm selling to wants it, then I'll definitely get the deal. That's true, but convincing the whole organization that they want it is a much steeper thing than a single potential buyer being convinced.
When you overcomplicate things, it also increases the potential risk for the buyer to have more exposure to other stakeholders. Now this is suddenly a much more complicated deal. There's more on the line. If it goes wrong, they're going to have spent more money or wasted money, or they're going to look terrible. And I mean, at the end of the day, every single person we're trying to sell to wants to look good to somebody. right? They like status drives so much of what we do, whether we're aware of it or not. And so when you think you are introducing more benefits and more features and more things we can do, you're potentially just making everything way more complicated and higher risk for the person who has to say yes. And you think you're adding a lot more value, but if it goes sideways, you're actually just making this whole thing much messier, aren't you?
Absolutely. And to your point, you're introducing risk to your buyer. An exercise that I run, and now I do this unconsciously, I do this in my daily life, but I do this in every business interaction that I have. Business is done between people. Yes, I've sold B2B most of my career. Business is done between people, period. And the person that you are dealing with at some point during the year is going to be sitting down at a table, either virtually or in person, across from their boss, and they're going to be getting their annual review. And there's probably going to be 3 or 4 metrics on that piece of paper that they are being evaluated on. And when I think about bringing value, creating value, through selling, through marketing, through engaging, through moving products, if I can't immediately in my head map the value that I'm bringing to one of the metrics that's likely going to be on that person's piece of paper, I know I've got a lot more work to do. Because even if it's the best thing in the world, if it's not what they're being judged on at the end of the year, best case scenario, you're just bringing them more work.
And so in your career, you've worked at Amazon, you've worked at GoDaddy, you've been part of financial institution startups in the payment space, including working at PayPal. You've been at some real large organizations, and you've had very senior roles in some of these companies. And so how did you go about getting that face time or deep understanding of the client's needs? Because if I go back to our growth of my own company, when there were 8 of us, 10 of us, 12 of us, I actually really loved that kind of magic size because I was close enough to the clients to still really deeply understand. They were emailing me and they're saying, Mark, I need this. I want that. Can you do this for us? And I could make the decision whether to add the service or not, or take it on or not, or what have you. When we were at 24 people and I was just really detached from the day-to-day work, I found it much harder to sell. And I'm not with 80 employees or 200 employees or 400 employees. So I can just imagine when you come into, let's use the example, GoDaddy. When you come into GoDaddy, how do you, in your senior director position, come in and be able to say, oh, I know what our customers need and want?
You have to prioritize it. You have to make time for it. It's the bottom line. You have to do the work.
But what does the work look like? Are you literally going out on calls with your sales team? Are you just calling people up and saying, hey, just
Absolutely.
So you know, I just want to know, why did you pick us? What do you like? What don't you like? Like just simple conversations?
All of the above and more. Sitting with the call center teams and listening in on calls, whatever's coming in, sitting on specific outbound calls where we had campaigns going to hear how the customer reacted to the offer, hear how the customer reacted to the price, to help the sales team in some ways better inquire and do good discovery. But bottom line, I want to hear firsthand from the customer what their problems are. And critical to do that frequently in different formats, in different ways. But bottom line, you have to dedicate the time and effort that it takes to engage the customers ongoing. You can't get a sense or a picture or a view of what the market looks like and then base all of your forward decisions on that, because by the time you do, the market's going to change. Another kind of critical tactic that I always use where I can is if I'm doing direct market research, if we're reaching out to prospects to understand a need. We did this at PayPal a lot. Rather than teeing up, hey, I'm Gary from PayPal, and I want to talk to you about the challenges that you face as a merchant with payments. As soon as you say what business you're in, what company you're with, what products that you sell, that merchant, that customer, that person, every preconception that they have about what is and isn't possible through your solution comes into their head. Oh, payments. It's just a utility. I need it so my people can buy from me. That is so limiting in the context of what a good payment strategy can actually deliver in terms of increased conversion rate, channel growth, net new customer acquisition, increased average order value. But as soon as you say who you are and what you do, any preconceptions that they have come to the fore. So what I have always done is I would schedule it through an intermediary. I would start off in talking to the customer or the prospect or customer with, we are a services business who does business with companies like yours. Let's start talking about your core and day-to-day challenges that you face in your business. Oftentimes they'll throw things out that we have no ability to actually impact based on the company that I represented at the time. But typically, pretty quickly, you would find something that they do have a need around. It's net new customer acquisition, it's growth, it's channel expansion, whatever. And then beginning to key in from there on what the granularity of those problems are. Oh, you've got a challenge because you're trying to grow your e-commerce channel and your conversion rate's bad. Or you're trying to expand geographically and yet you're not getting the penetration in these new markets that you have in your home market and you were hoping for. Now we can start getting more granular. Through the conversation, I may well divulge that, okay, well, actually what we're talking about here is payments and payment type and how that can affect conversion rate. Because someone's not going to pay with a payment method that they have no idea what it is, and frequently they can't. You have to be landing the right payment in front of the right customer at the right time. And then perhaps during the conversation, or perhaps not, I'll share what company I'm with. Bottom line, if you start very broad, you get a broad understanding of what their problems are and the potential impact is. If you lead the witness too much, they are going to limit what they tell you. They're going to limit what they talk about because they are going to put every preconception that they have about your solution in front of it.
So interesting because I see the value of both. And I get pushback from some of our clients. If we're doing, let's say we're doing market research, doing interviews. We did this recently. We did 24 interviews with all of these people. And we were a third party. We were hired to keep the data anonymous, so our client didn't know who said what, to help ensure that there was some level of trust and to ensure that we can have hard, honest conversations. And then we pull a report together, and I spend 3 hours with our executives as we go through it, and I'm pulling quotes. Like, it's a tough 3 hours to see what people really think about you, and it's uncomfortable. But often they would say, oh, this person used this term. Well, we don't do that. We do so much more than that. I know that you do, but this is how people think of you. See how limited it is? There must be something there. See how they use these terms constantly and they're confusing you with someone else or something else? There must be something there. It's one thing for us not to lead the witness, but I think that there's actually a lot of value in those very reductive perspectives and how people think of you, because that truly shows us at the end of the day how little people think of us and how little they understand about our industry and how little value they actually understand. For me, that means, wow, we have a lot of work ahead of us of sharing more stories, of educating better, of walking people through things, of just not over explaining things, but not underestimating how much work it takes to generate a lead, how many touch points you really require, how much hand-holding you really require, how much education is really required. Because if you just focus on those broad problems, but ignore those really specific things that you keep hearing time and time again, you miss out on, I don't know if there's like a middle gap, but do you know what I'm saying? Like you miss out on something.
I do. And the duality of the challenge here, and I agree with you, the duality of the challenge here is the fact that as soon as you have said who you are and what business you are from, there's no going back. You can't say, oh, well, wait a minute, let's just back off and talk about your high-level business problems. They're not going to go there mentally, right? They're still going to frame it through the conversation that they now know they're having. So you can absolutely get granular around your subject matter, your product line, the problems that it solves, the way that your customers and prospects in the market think about it. But you only have one chance to start from the other direction and really understand what the customer is thinking about and their business problems. It takes both. Really, what's important here is the ordering.
Okay, so I want to talk a bit about price sensitivity. A lot of times I'm hearing from business owners whose markets have commoditized, relationships that they've had, people are leaving or retiring and a younger generation's coming in, and They just want to look good by driving, by squeezing their vendors and partners as much as possible. Inflation is going up. Everyone wants more for less. So price is always a challenge and an issue. And if you're at GoDaddy, if you're at Amazon, if you're at PayPal, you have brand to help overcome some of these things. But you've also been at startups and you've been a part of organizations that did not have the luxury of brand behind you. And so how would you go about either understanding or managing? Because you can't interview your way to clients. Every client says, I want to pay less. So how do we address price sensitivity or commoditization in a market when brand is not on your side?
So there's a number of approaches here. I think first and foremost is starting with a quantification and understanding of the actual value that's delivered, because that is not always what you think it is. Back to our earlier conversation around your customer perceives you far differently than you actually believe you are or you perceive yourself. The way that they interpret the value you deliver may be completely different. And people take value for granted very, very quickly. You don't notice electricity until you walk into a room and flip the light switch and it doesn't go on. That's a really big and valuable and important thing in your life. And yet you never think about it until it's not there. You have to consistently remind the customer of the value that they're getting throughout the entire life cycle of the relationship. Number of ways to do that. I've had success in person-to-person contact where it's viable and cost effective. Things like proven value dashboards where the customer can see on an ongoing basis metrics that are indicative of value that your service or product is delivering to them. But bottom line, you have to be constantly reminding the customer of the value that they have. And it has to be the actual value as they perceive it, at least to a degree. People oftentimes market a service and think of it contextually as simply a service. You miss a tremendous amount of potential value that you can monetize if you're not thinking past that into how it impacts your customer. What is the tangible dollar figure impact of them not doing this or them using an inferior solution? Oftentimes, you can get really granular and specific there. If our solution increased your net conversion rate by 1/4 of a point, what's that worth to you? Well, if you're the Gap and you're doing $6 billion a year in e-commerce revenue, if I can increase your net conversion rate on your website by 1/4 of a point, that's millions of dollars of impact. So don't think about I'm marketing a payment solution. Think about I am selling you millions of dollars of additional revenue that you wouldn't otherwise get if you didn't go with my solution.
Oh, I like that. That is such a simple little tweak. In my career, we've spent a lot of time working with financial institutions, pension plans, larger kind of corporate clients, if we go back a few years. And one of our pension plans we've worked with 3 of them. One of them had $500 billion under management, which that's a lot of assets. But another CEO used to say when we would do their annual reporting and we would do all their annual reporting and communications for them, they'd always want to break everything down to like 3 digits. So, whatever it might be, $250 billion point 682. And we'd be like, gosh, we're communications people, we're marketing people, we're design people. Do we really have to go to all those digits? And then the CEO would always say, you do know that by the time we get to 3 digits, it's still tens of millions of dollars or whatever the conversion is, right? Like that extra 0.008 is still $80 million. So we really want to communicate those extra
Worth
details.
Talking about, yeah.
Because they're huge, huge numbers. And so if you're listening to this, you might say, well, listen, Mark, I'm not working with pension plans and I'm not selling to the Gap and I'm not helping them with their conversions. But what's so great about what you just shared is this idea of being able to tie this very small thing. And I always try to focus on 10 times value. And often we think of 10 times value in terms of returns, either money savings or what have you. But if we can save people time, if we can save people from having to hire additional staff, if we can save people overhead or increase productivity or bring pricing down or drive more revenue, there's so many different ways that we as an organization, there are specialty fields out there that are so understaffed that if you can help service a client in 8 weeks rather than have them take 6 months, that alone will be worth its weight in gold. If you're in mining and there's downtime on equipment, or if you're in manufacturing and control systems and there's downtime on equipment, every second that's going by is worth something to that organization. And what I hear you saying is, if we could just do a better job of quantifying that for the person we're sitting across from, we can start to show that our small fee relative to the entire organization is like a no-brainer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At a former startup I was with called CardTap, we automated a sales follow-up to a great degree in sales enablement stack. Really interesting technology that had been built. And I remember one particular client, insurance broker, 20 agents, 2 support staff. The platform, as we deployed it to their 20 reps, automated enough of lead follow-up and lead generation that they were able to actually let go of one of their support personnel. Now, it was a happy story because that person became an agent and began selling, but literally somebody who had been almost $100,000 of fully sunk operational costs, that entire person's costing was obviated by about a $20,000 per year engagement with our platform. It's 5-to-1 return, but it was really quantifiable, and they brought it to us, right? We were selling on increased close rate and other values. Particularly, we knew that there was some time savings and efficiency gains, but we hadn't quantified it. And they told us unsolicited, this has automated so much of our sales follow-up that I was able to take one of our support folks and move them out entirely. That's a great value story for them. And it's yet another way that value can be quantified. It's cost savings, it's time savings, it's revenue growth. It's a lot of different paradigms, but you got to find it and you got to quantify it.
So I've been speaking with Gary Arnold, and he is a growth leader, a value creator, and the lead of a company called EXECUTE, which is a mastermind for business owners. And you can learn more about that. All of Gary's details will be down in the show notes. But Gary, I do have one last question for you before we wrap up. And it's a question I love to end every conversation with, because I feel like it just boils everything down to a fine point. So if you had to give us one tip, one strategy to help us sell more, what would that be?
Engage your customers, engage your prospects, expect nothing in return. Find the value there for both of you, and never be bashful about the fact that your time has value as well. Search for value until you discover it, or until you discover it's not there, and then move on, because you got more valuable things to do with your time.
That was the conversation I had with Gary Arnold. Now, to wrap up, I'm going to share my 3 biggest takeaways from this talk. Number 1, close the deal that's in front of you. So often, we want to show how smart we are, how deep our capabilities go, the depth of our experience, how much we can help everyone with absolutely everything. And what do? We tank the deal that's in front of us. If you have established value, if you understand your prospect's problem, and you all agree that you can solve that problem, don't overcomplicate things. Don't bog things down with extra details. Simply sell the deal that's in front of you, and you can always expand on it later. Number 2, business is not done between businesses. Even if you're in B2B, business is done between people. And so we have to recognize the fact that our prospect, our clients, our customers, at the end of the day, they are responsible to someone. They have a boss, they have a manager, they have shareholders, they have a board, maybe they have a balance sheet, and they have a spouse. And someone is going to be questioning the decisions that they have made. And when people make decisions that make them look and feel stupid, they don't love that. Surprise. When they make decisions that make them look and feel smart, they love that. They feel great about it. And so as you're working with someone, a prospect or a customer, as you're selling them, we have to respect and understand that at the end of the day, they are going to be held accountable to somebody. And so if we can work to ensure that our outcomes, our results, or the goals of the work that we're doing is going to align with making them look and feel smarter and be able to report back up that this was a great decision, Yahtzee. If we're not able to do that, then chances are we have more work to do in the sales process. And number 3, your prospects and your customers and people outside of your industry, they perceive your value completely different than you do. You are in your industry, you're in your world, you've chosen to dedicate your career, your business, and your life to what it is that you do. But your prospects, they are barely swimming on the surface. They don't know what you know, they don't value what you value, they don't understand what you understand. And so we can approach the market trying to educate everyone and trying to argue with everyone and trying to show them why we are the better way, but that can come across as argumentative or condescending, or it can make people feel stupid about themselves. It's much easier to understand what they value and how they interpret and perceive what it is you do, understand the words they use, the language they use, how they go about figuring out who you are and what you do, and then just parrot that back to them. Just meet them where they are at. Don't try to argue with them. Don't try to overcomplicate things. Just understand that they perceive your value different than you do, and present back to them what matters most to each of them. So there you have it. Those were my 3 biggest takeaways from this talk. But I'm curious, what were yours? Anything challenge your perspective? Any light bulbs go off? Let's dive deeper into this over on LinkedIn, where I share more insights and I like to spark a conversation. My name is Mark Drager. You can find my contact details in the episode show notes. Now, while you're over on LinkedIn, be sure to give Gary a follow for more impactful and insightful content. And if you want to learn more about what Gary's doing with Execute, the Better Mastermind, you can learn about that at etw.com/mastermind. And one last thing, if you've made it this far into the show, you really should subscribe. And here's why. Each week, we share actionable strategies and tips, just like what Gary shared with us today, to be able to grow your business, make your marketing and advertising more effective, and at the end of the day, to boost sales. And with that, I want to thank you for listening. I am Mark Drager. I will catch you in the next episode.